For years, we've pretty much been sold this one single idea of what happiness looks like, a calendar that's just packed with social events and, of course, a huge circle of friends. But what if that's not the whole story? What if that's not even the right story for a lot of us? Today, we're diving into the psychology behind why having just a few good friends, or even really preferring your own company, might actually be a sign of incredible strength.
Does this sound at all familiar? Your phone buzzes. It's another invite to a big group thing. And that first feeling you get, it isn't excitement. It's this wave of exhaustion. You would genuinely, 100%, rather spend your Saturday reorganizing your bookshelf than making small talk at some loud party. Trust me, it's a feeling a lot of us have had.
And that feeling, it almost always leads to this question. In a world that just seems to scream more is better when it comes to being social, it's so easy to think you're somehow broken for craving a little quiet. But the science? Well, it tells a completely different and frankly, a much more validating story. All right, so first things first, let's just tackle the biggest misconception right out of the gate, what I like to call the myth of more. This is really the heart of the problem, isn't it? We see it everywhere, on social media, in movies, these big, happy friend groups, and we just assume that the number of friends you have directly equals how happy you are. But for decades, psychologists have been pointing out that this just isn't true. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes us tick. Okay, so to really get why that's a myth, we have to pull apart two words that our culture uses like they mean the same thing. Solitude and loneliness. They are absolutely not the same thing. And this is where research, like the work from the University of Chicago, is just so helpful. It shows us that loneliness is that painful, sinking feeling that your social needs aren't being met. It's a feeling of lack. But chosen solitude? That's something else entirely. It's a state of contentment. It's not about a lack of options. It's about making a deliberate choice for smaller, deeper connections. This is exactly why the scientific tools they use, like famous UCLA loneliness scale, don't ask you how many friends you have. They don't care about that number. They ask questions like, is there someone you can really talk to? Or do you feel isolated from others? See, what they're measuring is the quality of feeling seen and understood, and that has almost nothing to do with how many contacts are in your phone. So this brings us to this really fascinating flip of the script. What if preferring solitude isn't some kind of social problem, but actually a sign of a rich inner world? Well, personality research consistently shows that people who are genuinely comfortable with their own company, who enjoy it, they tend to score really high in things like self-awareness and emotional independence. They know who they are. They can rely on themselves emotionally, and their motivation comes from their own values, not from needing everyone else to approve of them. They aren't trying to get away from connection. They just don't need it to feel whole. Psychologists have a term for this key skill. It's emotional self-regulation. And really, it's the ability to just sit with your own thoughts and feelings, the good, the bad, the uncomfortable, without immediately needing to grab your phone or call someone to fill the silence. It's a psychological muscle, and honestly, in our noisy world, a lot of people never get the chance to really build it. And here's the payoff. When someone who is truly comfortable with themselves does decide to connect with you, it's not coming from a place of desperation or neediness. They're reaching out from a place of wholeness, which, as you can imagine, leads to much deeper, much more authentic relationships. It's the ultimate example of quality over quantity. Now, this foundation of self-reliance actually builds into some pretty surprising superpowers, including one that has basically driven human innovation for centuries. First, just look at this number. There was this huge aging study of over 30,000 people, and they found something pretty remarkable. They found a group of people who were, by definition, socially isolated. They had very small networks. But, and this is the key, they reported low loneliness. And get this, in many cases, they were actually functioning better than people who had huge social circles but still felt disconnected. And then there's the creativity piece. Albert Einstein was so onto something here. He knew that solitude wasn't an empty void. It was fertile ground where new ideas could actually grow. And today, modern neuroscience totally backs him up. See, when your brain isn't constantly busy processing social cues, reading faces, thinking of what to say next, it has the bandwidth to slip into what's called divergent thinking mode. This is where your brain can make all these weird and unusual connections. It's where original ideas come from, free from the pressure of what the group thinks. People with fewer friends aren't missing out on inspiration. They're creating the perfect space for it. Now, hang on. It is absolutely essential that we hit pause here for a critical warning.
We are not romanticizing isolation. There is a very real, very serious danger we need to be clear about. So let's be perfectly clear. Chosen, content solitude is one thing. Chronic, unwanted loneliness is another thing entirely. Research from places like the National Institute on Aging shows that perceived isolation, that gut-wrenching feeling of being truly alone and disconnected in the world, has severe, documented health risks. This is about feeling painfully cut off, and it can happen to someone in a crowded room just as easily as someone who lives alone.
Okay, so where does that leave us? Well, it brings us to our final and maybe the most important section, finding your social fit.
The biggest trap we all fall into is thinking there's one correct social diet that works for everyone, but it's just not true. Some people genuinely thrive on constant interaction with a lot of people. Others need just one deep connection and a whole lot of time to recharge. Neither of those is wrong. What really matters is alignment. Is your life set up in a way that actually meets your needs, or are you trying to force yourself into a social mold that just leaves you feeling drained?
So I'll just ask you straight up, does your current social life energize you or does it deplete you? And there's no judgment in that answer, by the way. The only goal here is self-awareness. If there is one thing, just one thing, you take away from all of this, let it be this simple reframing. Solitude isn't emptiness. It's not a void that you need to fill. It's space. It's space to think, space to create, space to process, and space to really understand who you are without the constant noise of the outside world. Because in the end, finding that right balance is so deeply personal. The person with just two close friends and a rich inner life isn't failing at being social. They might be succeeding at being themselves. And sometimes the most powerful and authentic choice you can possibly make is to honor what you truly need and to choose the quiet, even when, and maybe especially when, the whole world is telling you to choose the crowd.